Hello, everybody. Yeah, hello, everybody. Ooh, look at that! I'm just standing on snow. It's not even breaking through. That's how thick it is. It's ice. Anyways, today is the 40th anniversary of the Challenger disaster, and I'm going to talk about it, how it happened, what exactly happened, some other things too. So, the Challenger was a space shuttle, right? It had been launched 9 successful missions prior to 1986, since 1983 of April, and that was good. But when this new mission came up to deploy satellites, like new satellites, into the Earth's orbit for like better communication and some other things, kind of there were some concerns. Also this mission would like put a social studies teacher into space, like the teacher in space program. Put the first teacher in space. They weren't going to the moon. No, they weren't going to the moon. That was Apollo, long gone. Anyways, so the concerns, the whole flight in the mission was delayed a lot of times, and they originally put like the whole system spacecraft out, on the launch pad, and they delayed it a bunch of times in like the winter cold, which was not good. I pressed on it too hard, which is not good. And so I'm sick in here. And so, that O-rings, okay? Let's talk about O-rings. O-rings are the like a rubber sort of sealment. It, goes between the segments of like the side boosters, solid rocket boosters, like the ones that go on the left and the right of the big orange thing. The big orange thing. Anyways, yeah, so they were made up into four separate segments, for like, it was kind of easier that way instead of like one full segment. There were some issues with the full like rocket, but different segments were good. Anyways, so when a rocket launches, there's like a bunch of like hot gases inside those solid rocket boosters. All right. So to prevent like leakage into like the other segments, they put like these things called O-rings, like this elastic putty rubber sort of material, so it can seal like the different segments, so I can like and prevent that, right? But one of the O-rings in the right the right booster was it was not working. And with the cold temperatures throughout that winter, since it was sitting out there for so long because it was delayed for so long, it just made the whole thing worse. But when they finally launched on January 28th, 1986, with 7 crew members, including that social studies teacher, I think I mentioned she was a social studies teacher, right? Yeah. After launch, as we all know, the famous 73-second flight kind of ended in a disaster. Not a lot of people were watching it televised, but like reruns were played, replays. Anyways, so when it launched, the O-ring that wasn't working, it let hot pressurized gases just leak out and burn through the external fuel tank, right? The big orange thing, the external fuel tank, right? That carried the space shuttle, which, the Challenger is the space shuttle itself. It burned into that fuel tank, and that fuel tank just started ripping apart. It released liquid oxygen, hydrogen over the place, and it ignited into a flame ball. It wasn't an explosion. Common myth, it wasn't an explosion that happened. No, some TV documentaries might put explosions in the images, but it wasn't an explosion. And so when that happened, when the big fireball happened, then the Space Shuttle Challenger started ripping apart, it started tearing apart or whatever. And the other boosters, the other things just kept going, while meanwhile the Space Shuttle was falling apart. They just kept going up in the air. Out of control, albeit, but, they were still going. When the shuttle was tearing apart, all the pieces kept flinging up because, its own propulsion, momentum, just made it go up. So much debris and fireballs everywhere. And another common myth is that the crew didn't die instantly. Or the myth is they died instantly, but that's not true. They didn't die instantly, which is really, really dark. So we're not quite sure if they were conscious during which, but when the whole thing started ripping apart, the crew cabin of the space shuttle itself, it can be seen coming from the whole fireball and the mess or whatever. So we don't know if the crew was actually conscious during that time. They could have been unconscious. Maybe like the last few seconds before impact with the ocean, they could have been conscious, but it'd be too late by then. Couldn't do anything. So 2 minutes and 45 seconds after the whole breakup of the space shuttle, the crew cabin of the space shuttle crashed into the ocean over 200 miles per hour. That's about like 200 G's of force. G-forces, right? Crash into, obviously, immediately upon impact, structural damage, everything's just dead. Everybody's dead. The whole cabin is just destroyed completely. Over 200 miles per hour at the ocean. Come on, man. Can't be serious. So there was that. So yeah, I guess that's all I have to say. That's about it. That's how it happened. That's why it happened. That's what happened to the crew member, since, that happened to the crew member. Yeah, but after everything was like, going up in the air, and it all came down. It kept coming down so much. No one could get like a rescue team or anything like anywhere because, the debris kept coming down. It only took about like 15 minutes until that. So, yeah. CNN broadcasted it live, though. That's about it, though. The advent of cable TV, maybe. So, that's the video. See you in the next one. Bye. Why is this 8 minutes?